I'd like to briefly acclimate everyone to our event today, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues. So before we get started, I wanted to again welcome everybody to UCLA. My name is Taylor Dudley. I'm the Executive Director here at the UCLA Pritzker Center. I want to give a huge shout out to my team and colleagues. If you're part of our UCLA Pritzker Center team, please stand up. We have the great privilege of having three of our faculty here today, Dr. Tyrone Howard, Dr. Audra Langley, and Dr. Todd Frankie. You can see you behind the post. And many of our student leaders in the blue shirts. Please talk with them. They're so eager to learn and share about their time here at UCLA. And we have many of our amazing staff here as well, and I want to thank them for making this event possible. Thank you all. So the UCLA Pritzker Center unites a multidisciplinary network across campus to do two things. The first is to ask questions about how we can prevent the need for foster care. And the second is around how we can help reform our child welfare system for kids who are in it and who have been impacted by it. We're really grateful to do this work in a multidisciplinary fashion that addresses everything from education to mental health, to healthcare, to social work, to public policy, law, and a number of other areas and disciplines that our kids and families interface with. If you talk with our staff, you'll find that we all have different backgrounds, in addition to our students representing a wide array of majors and disciplines here on campus. So today is one such example of our work. And it's really an example of how we partner with the community. I'm especially grateful for the opportunity to work with Good River Partners. We have Daniel and Kevin here today, and they're going to introduce themselves and talk more about their work. But as we discuss housing in particular today, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the tremendous housing that was lost in light of the Eaton Fire and the Palisades Fire, perhaps impacting some of you in this room. Our hearts go out to all of you who were so deeply impacted, and we hope you know that we stand with you and continue to hope for a better future for all of you that were so devastated by the many losses associated with these fires. So, as we talk about housing today, we are really honored, like I said, to introduce Daniel with Good River Partners. He's going to tell you a little bit about their work, and then we'll start talking about the research. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I want to start this out by just saying who we are and what we do. I'm Daniel. I'm a journalist who covers child welfare and juvenile justice for a long, long time. I did that because I saw that, because I had mentored two young men in the system who were facing their futures without much support. And I watched and covered over the next 15 years as the federal, state, and local government invested to ensure that foster youth don't become homeless. And we see that that's still an issue, and an issue everybody in this room is working to correct in some manner. I'm looking at you from CLC. Your housing program is a real godsend to the county. So what we're trying to do here, and we've been working, myself and Kevin and other partners, working to figure out ways to sort of privately finance housing for young people in and exiting foster care. And that means setting aside lots of units for lots of young people. And to do that right, I think it's about about understanding what they want, what they need. We did this in New York City. Kawina from Hilton is here. Hilton helped support that work, wherein we did a housing design fellowship with 6 young people who had been impacted by the foster care system to set their housing standards. That sort of builds on where we're going today, trying to get a more robust understanding of what the housing preferences and needs are of young people, what their access to services, including mental health, behavioral health, and everything else is, and what they want, so that we can start setting aside units for these young people that meet their needs. And I'll let the esteemed Brenda and the esteemed Kevin explain the findings, and thanks for all of your work on this. I want to thank the UniHealth Foundation, Jen and David right there. Thank you very much for supporting this work. And when we got the data back and we realized we needed some more help and we had to bring in the Pritzker Center, we pulled on some grant funding from the Wells Fargo Foundation. Justine's here. Thank you very much for supporting this work as well. And David asked a question, which was, how do we apply these findings? Well, how do you actually use what we're finding? And been lucky to work with Andre Bueno and Anna Schiff in the back at Better Angels, working on a project at Sunset Junction to house current and former foster youth and those in higher education through LACCD. So, we're having a practical application right now, and then in policy as well. Kevin kind of wrote and helped think about, and with the California Alliance, sponsored AB 1314, which is a bill that will remove barriers for service providers like Sam here from Sycamores and others, so that a young person is not precluded to a certain spa. Maybe can go to the next spa over. Maybe can live with the person they love or live with a roommate. That made it through appropriations. That was voted on yesterday, right? It made it out of the assembly, so it goes to the Senate. So we're trying to apply these findings in real time, and we're trying to build a body of research so that other partners out there who are thinking about creating housing, I'm looking at you, Heather, from Allies, who's got a site that you're looking to design and build. Hopefully these findings can be helpful in making that as good as possible. Joe Womack's here, Our Lady Queen of Angels, Willowbrook, set-asides for foster youth. How can this research that we're doing help all of the other partners who are out there? Robert Castaneda, you're doing incredible work at DCFS. Clap it up for Robert. Helping navigate young people, finding them housing, doing everything he can with a relatively small division at GCFS, the Supportive Housing Division, maybe the first in the nation of its kind. And hopefully this can be helpful in thinking about what the young people want. I know you interact with young people all the time, so you know real well too, and we're going to hear from young people as well. So that's how we're trying to apply this. We hope it's helpful to the field. And with that, I will hand it over to Abigail to give us our land dedication.
Hello everybody, my name is Abigail Adams, and I am a student researcher here at the UCLA Pritzker Center. I'm graduating this June with a degree in Public Affairs and African American Studies. After June, I will be entering the job market and hope to continue working in research and program implementation supporting our existing social safety net. Now, I will be doing our land acknowledgement. The UCLA Pritzker Center is mindful of the child welfare system's disparate impact on Native families. The land we are on here at UCLA, a land-grant institution, is the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino and Tonga peoples. Thank you. Now, I am pleased to introduce Kevin Clark. Kevin is
UniHealth. So hey everybody, Kevin Clark with Good River, and I'm going to share a little bit, kind of frame the context and the conversation for today, and talk about why we are focusing on transitional housing for foster youth. You can see here the first few bullet points there kind of define the issue. Nationally, we're seeing roughly 31 to 46% of young folks having experienced, or say former foster youth having experienced, or being homeless at some point by the time that they turn 26. In California, there was some really great research that Cal Youth study, I'm sure many of you have heard of it, found that about a quarter of youth between the ages of 21 and 24 had experienced homelessness in California. And on top of that, an additional 28% had experienced or indicated that they had couch surfing at some point. And when we drill down and we focus here in Los Angeles County, when I saw the statistic, I was just shocked. Over a third of the total unhoused population in LA County was part of the child welfare system or juvenile justice system at some point in their life. So we like to think of this as a foster care and homelessness pipeline. The evidence is very clear, and it's something that we have to really address. So in terms of the actual study itself, the purpose of it was to try to get a sense of, as Daniel mentioned, what young folks want, what they need. We think we may know, but what are young people actually saying about their experiences with transitional housing, and what do they need to succeed? And also thinking about that in terms of future investments for the field, future investments into transitional housing. So that's the purpose of it all. A little bit about the actual study itself and the survey design. We at Good River worked with a panel or a focus group of 4 lived experts to really shape the survey questions. In total, there were about 70 questions, so this was a pretty exhaustive survey. And then we also worked with subject matter experts and researchers to validate and look at some of those questions and make sure that we were heading in the right direction and asking the right questions. We piloted it with a focus group of the experts, and then we disseminated or distributed the survey to child welfare folks across the county, lots of service providers, folks like CLC, other youth serving organizations. And we collected just over 200, about 230 responses between the second half of last year. And folks were people that actually completed the survey received $50 for completing the survey. And we partnered with another group, STM, who is unfortunately not here today, to administer the survey and collect all the responses. So I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Brenda. I'm going to go back to this slide. I'm going to introduce her. Dr. Brenda Tolley serves as research director at the UCLA Pritzker Center. Brenda joined the UCLA Pritzker Center in 2022, following 20 years of social work practice with children, youth, and families on the edge of or in the child welfare system. Brenda currently serves as the fellow in the Rural Housing and Homelessness Leadership Network and obtained her PhD in social welfare from UCLA, Blessing School of Public Affairs. Let's give a warm welcome to Brenda.
Thank you, Kevin, Daniel, and Taylor, for kicking us off. I want to run through our agenda quickly. For the rest of the morning, this is what we're doing. We will have a presentation of findings, and then a panel with lived experts and a service provider, facilitated by another lived expert and current service provider. And then we'll have an opportunity for small group discussions at your tables. So as we're presenting the findings, as our panelists are speaking, feel free to be jotting things down that you want to talk about more at your table. And after that, we'll come back together in a large conversation that Kevin will facilitate.
That conversation will be focused on your feedback, recommendations, and next steps, and then we'll conclude. Okay, Abigail, I'm turning it back to you to kick us off.
Now we're going to dive into our findings. So first, we need to understand who participated in the Tay Housing Preferences Survey. A total of 230 young people participated in the survey. Among these participants, their ages ranged from 18 to 24. The average age of survey participants was 20 years old, as shown in the yellow bar on our bar graph. Now for the racial and ethnicity characteristics. Just under half of our survey participants identified as Hispanic or Latinx only, and just over a quarter of participants identified as Black or African American. 1/5 identified as multiracial. Our survey participants represented a variety of social identities and life experiences. Among these participants, a little over half identified as women, 5% identified as genderqueer, non-binary, or transgender, while the rest identified as men. As for sexual orientation, 19% of our participants identified as LGBTQ+, whereas 81% of participants identified as straight. 1 in 8 participants reported having a child or dependents, whereas 1 in 10 participants reported having a disability. Finally, 86% of participants reported having received a high school diploma or GED. In the survey, participants reported which transitional housing programs they had either lived in or were currently living in. Some of these participants have only experienced one type of transitional housing program. This group represented 39% of individuals who had only participated in the transitional housing program for non-minor dependents. This program is available for young people in extended foster care between the ages of 18 and 20. Additionally, 23% of participants reported experience with Transitional Housing Plus program, which serves young people ages 18 to 24, a slightly broader age range, who have already exited the foster care system. Finally, our participants were asked if they had ever experienced one or more challenging experience. Just under half of participants reported not experiencing any of the challenging experiences, while just over half reported experiencing at least one type of challenging experience. The most common occurrence was homelessness or housing insecurity, with just under half of participants reporting this challenge. Next was food insecurity, with nearly 30% of participants reporting this challenge. For both juvenile system involvement and substance abuse, about 10% of participants reported experiences in each category. Finally, 2% of participants reported commercial sexual exploitation. It is likely that young people with lived experience in this room and people who have worked with them are not surprised by these findings. We know that young people in foster care face more challenges than their peers outside of the system. Best practices call for trauma-informed programs, and supports for young people's sense of safety is prioritized, along with opportunities for healing and lasting connections. These findings underscore the necessity for implementing best practices like these. Now I'm going to hand it over to Brenda.
Okay, so the next part of the survey asked young people how prepared they felt to find and secure housing on their own and also to live independently. So here we see that on average, survey participants felt neither unprepared nor prepared to find and secure housing without child welfare system support. So what sense do you make of that? I threw that out as a question for you to consider talking about at your tables later, but also we've had some thoughts about this. The housing market is tough. That is a regular conversation. Both the shortage of housing, the shortage of affordable housing, and then you add young people coming into the housing space, potentially without background, without support. And so we'll talk a little bit about some barriers young people reported in the survey as they went out to look for housing. So young people seem uncertain about how well prepared they are to get out there and and get housing on their own. Additionally, young people were asked, how prepared do you feel to live independently? Once you make that transition out of the child welfare system to living on your own. And here we see people felt somewhat prepared on average. So it's a little bit more encouraging. We also compared these findings to similar survey questions that were asked in the CalU study. We looked at the data from 2015 when young people were aged 19, and there's a subset of the report available for Los Angeles County, so that's what we compared these findings to. And what we found is that young people today feel less prepared in both areas than young people in the CalU study did in 2015. So this is another data point, I think, for us to really ponder and dig into as we continue the conversation today. Again, we know that there's the political climate today is somewhat different than 2015. We know that the housing situation has gotten more difficult over the last 10 years. So those may be some things, but let's dig into that a little bit further. All right, I'm gonna turn it to Kevin to talk about preferences.
Okay, so first question that we asked in the survey was ranking location versus amenities. Which was more important to you? Was the location of where you were living or the amenities that the apartment provided more important? And overwhelmingly, 78% of survey respondents said that location was the most important thing. That's also consistent with some of the work that we did in New York City, which also found that location was highly important. And when we're looking at exactly the locations that young folks preferred, you'll see here that South Bay, Harbor, which includes the city of Long Beach, ended up making number one spot for location. Followed up by San Bernardino Valley, that's spot 2, and then spot 3, the San Gabriel Valley. In terms of the actual reasons why, and I'll also say that there's that little city of Los Angeles, that's not necessarily a specific spot or area, but respondents just saying that the city of Los Angeles or Los Angeles was the preferred area. And we also asked why these locations were desirable. And a lot of reasons why. There's a whole list of maybe 15. But we took the top reasons. And I think it's important to point out that proximity to familiarity is the top reason you look at this, right? So family nearby, near work, school, or job opportunities, or work, school, and the jobs that young folks are currently working with. And just an important point to underscore, we don't really want to be moving to places that we're unfamiliar with, or we don't have a connection to, or it's not easy to get to the places and locations where we are familiar with, and the folks that we're familiar with. We also asked a little bit about the undesirable locations, and while not reflected here on this particular slide, South Central, Compton, downtown Los Angeles were the specific areas that young folks indicated that they were undesirable places. And the reasons for those locations being undesirable were, again, not close to the things that were familiar to them. So being far away from work, school, or community. And also too crowded and noisy. In terms of amenities, I won't spend too much slide on this, or some time on this slide, but you can see that this little board cloud here, right in the middle, washer and dryer. I agree, 100%. Also, furnished apartments was something that came up quite often. I know a lot of service providers offer furnished apartments already for the young folks that they work with, so that also makes sense. A little bit interesting, we see parking also coming up pretty high, although over 75% of the survey respondents said that they take public transit as their main source of transportation. So that's a little bit of an anomaly, or we're not really quite sure why that's coming up so much. So I'd be curious to hear what y'all think about that. In terms of ideal living arrangements, so we asked, where would you rather live in a studio or a one-bedroom apartment by yourself, or do you want to live in a two-bedroom apartment with roommates? It's probably no surprise, or maybe it is a surprise to you, that nearly 3/4 of respondents said that they wanted to live in their own place. And then if you look at the second pie, of the folks who said they wanted to live by themselves, the majority of those young folks said that that was the only place and the only type of arrangement that they wanted to live in. But about a third said that they were also open to other living arrangements. And on the right side of this graph, you'll see the kind of breakdown of supportive housing, the types of other living arrangements that there was a openness to.
Kevin, sorry to interrupt. Kevin, any way you could just can you talk a little bit about what we were talking about in terms of Taylor and all of us, just sort of like what could be driving this desire for their own unit beyond sort of what seems on its face, it's always nice to have your own place.
Yeah, I think that there's the idea of living independently sounds extremely appealing, especially if you're coming from perhaps a more congregate style setting, right? And so this idea, we think about the question that we asked, do you want to live by yourself in your own space or live with other roommates, things like that? I mean, it makes sense given the kind of experiences of young folks going through the child welfare system that they're going to value this sense of independence, or value the sense of having their own space, right? That's probably something that not a lot of us have experienced going through the child welfare system, whether that was being in a short-term residential therapeutic placement or being with folks who aren't necessarily our families. It's different, right? And so that idea of being able to have my own space, that's super appealing. That's super appealing. But there's also trade-offs with living alone, right? The idea of being on your own for the first time, it brings up questions of isolation. There's trade-offs. And so I think keeping that in mind as well, holding that true, valuing independence while also understanding the trade-offs is important for all of us who are working in the field. So the appeal of communal living. This is communal living we defined as having shared common spaces. So think of kitchens that are shared, bathrooms that are shared, living rooms that are shared. This could be in a two-bedroom apartment, but also really thinking more of a dormitory style situation. Huge, just more than half, just about half of respondents said that they weren't really interested in that type of living. Though a third said they found communal living to be appealing. Again, communal living, that idea, I think may evoke certain sentiments that are aligned with more of a congregate care placement style, like an STRTP or single site transitional housing. So again, I think it's kind of clear why there's such a strong unappealingness to this type of setting, but something to keep in mind. And then we were also asked about willingness to move for rent. Of the young folks who had indicated that they had actually looked for housing, 66% said that they would be willing to move for lower rents. And I just want to underscore the willingness piece of this, right? Young folks are capable of adapting, capable of being able to navigate something like this. There's a willingness. Two more slides in this section. We asked about frequency of on-site case management services. And more than half of respondents indicated a preference for at least monthly case management, with 32% saying that they wanted more than once a week to be in interacting and having a touch point with transition housing provider staff. We think there's potentially some few reasons for why we're seeing that high of an interest. That was actually surprising to me. I mean, as a young person, I don't know, I kind of want to just do my own thing, like run around and not be told what to do. So, but it may be that mentorship is important, and this could be an indication, this high level of desire, could be an indication of high quality services, case managers being provided by providers, as being beneficial and positive, and then young folks are interested. On the flip side, this may also be a signal that youth have become accustomed to case management over the course of their foster care arc. Maybe an indication of young folks having kind of more of an institutionalized experience, right? What they know is professional case management. We don't know, but some things to think about and hold as we're going to go into breakouts. And finally, we wanted to understand if there were any differences between the two major types of THP programs. That's NMD for the 18 to 21-year-olds and Plus for ages up to 25. No, there's not really any significant differences between those two programs. And I think that's important because I think there is some perception that these programs are working with youth who are in different places in their lives, but we didn't see any difference between their willingness, or I should say preparedness to exit and find their own housing. Okay, I'm going to turn over to Brenda to take us to the next section.
Okay, the survey also asked young people about needs that they have. And so we'll present that next. And again, this is likely not going to be surprising for young people who've moved through the system or for folks who are supporting them. So first and foremost, we see that 63% of young people reported having at least one unmet basic need while they were in the last 12 months. So they're in foster care still, or they're in a transitional housing program, and they're still having unmet basic needs. Transitional housing providers likely know this. I used to run a transitional housing program in New York City, and we built into the program opportunities for food to be available, for cooking as a group, so that folks would have access to things that they needed and couldn't afford. So we see that food is the biggest unmet basic need. Nearly 3/4 of young people reported not having enough food consistently. 61% reported not having the resources to purchase clothing as they needed. 43% reported the same about hygiene products, so not having enough resources to purchase the hygiene products that they needed. That's almost half. The other needs that folks were asked about, fewer people reported those needs being unmet related to transportation, childcare, and technology. I suspect that the childcare piece of this is reflective of the small number of young people who completed the survey who are parenting. I see a lot of heads nodding on that one. Yeah, so that I think bears further conversation, and one of our panelists will be able to speak to that, so thank you. And, all right, so. Next up, folks were asked about healthcare and health insurance. So 88% of young people reported that they had health insurance coverage, which is great. Obviously, we need that to be 100% because everyone's eligible until they turn 26. So there's some work to do there to fill that gap. And the folks who are not sure, obviously we need to be supporting people to know and understand what coverage they do have. Young people were pretty confident, so well over half were confident or extremely confident that they could access access healthcare services independently. That's promising. However, only 2/3 had actually seen a primary care physician in the past year. So there's, again, a gap there. That preventive service, preventive healthcare service is so important. We know that young people in the foster care system tend to have higher medical needs than other folks, and so we need to be, continuing to work with young people on understanding that and accessing preventive services. We also know that young adults feel pretty invincible, and so we need to kind of be addressing that as well. And again, I don't think folks will be too surprised at that finding, but it really points to some gaps. And then finally, we talked about a subset of young people who completed the survey who shared that they had searched for housing in the last 12 months. So that group was about 35% of young people who went out and tried to get their own housing, and they ran into a bunch of barriers. The biggest barrier, which again, in LA, the mantra is that the rent is too high. Young people found that themselves firsthand. So 72% found that, and another 61% reported that their income is too low. Those two things would go together, right? Then we have lack of credit score or a low credit score interfering with young people getting housing, 61% of them. 43% said that not having rental history or a limited rental history was an obstacle that they faced. And then 32% of young people said not having a cosigner was a barrier to getting their own housing. And you see the other reasons here as well. So we know that getting housing is an uphill battle. It's an uphill battle for many people in LA. And this is the work that Daniel and Kevin and many of you in the room are trying to address. And obviously it takes a village, it takes a community, it takes a county to do that work together. So thank you for being here. We are going to move next to our panel. And Abigail's going to make that transition.
Thank you, Kevin and Brenda, for sharing our survey findings. Our panel will help us move these findings into practice and to experience spaces with lived experience. I'm pleased to introduce Tay Thompson, who is going to be our panel moderator. Tay is a lived expert, co-founder and executive director of Twinspire, PhD candidate in urban schooling at the UCLA School of Education and Information Studies, and, last but not least, a graduate student researcher at the UCLA Pritzker Center. Welcome, Tay.
Well, what a lovely morning we've had so far. You all, this house is packed. So let's give a round of applause for being here in this space and showing up. We have some incredible panelists who are here with us today, and I want to introduce them. First, I'm going to have Sam Gonzalez to come up, the Chief Business Development Officer at Sycamores. Give him a round of applause. Next, we have our lived experts. Jordan Edwards, foster youth advocate and cosmetology student at West Valley Occupational Center. And last, but certainly not least, Ferrari Woodmore, parent and foster youth advocate. Make some noise. Alrighty, so you all, we just saw an incredible presentation around the findings of this report here. And for our panelists here, I want to ask you all a question. What stood out to you all the most around what you heard this morning around the findings? And I'm going to just pass you the mic here, unless we have another mic. We got another mic. I'll just pass this.
I mean, none of it was really surprising. I mean, I've been doing this for 25 years, and it was pretty much same results as I would have had 25 years ago. So none of it was super surprising, but what I am thinking about, we talked about the pipeline to homelessness and how, what was it, 35% said that they had experience in the foster system that were homeless living on the streets right now. My concern is a lot of preventative care and prevention dollars has been attacked, and so I wonder about what it looks like in the future. If it's 35% now, what is that going to look like down the road? And I'm very concerned about that. The good news is all of us here today, in 25 years, I've been involved when youth used to exit at 18, and then it went to 21. So we would struggle to find dollars or anybody who really cared about these youth that were exiting care at that time. And that's not the case today. So I'm super hopeful about that, but we do need to make some changes together.
Thank you, Sam. Anyone else?
I would just say, as far as for the findings, what I hear from all of my fellow brothers and sisters out there who are former foster youth, who are still in group homes, in programs and centers, that these, as far as how it goes with the findings, not only do they face those challenges that we witnessed in there, but as far as the case management findings, I find that very particular to pertain to me, because I hear that a lot as far as how we don't get to see case managers often or have that chance to connect with somebody, whether it not be on a day-to-day basis or it be on a type of time to where we only see them when it's convenient for them, or when they have time to pop up in and out of our life, like, hey, we see you this Wednesday, all right, catch you in 2 weeks. It's bigger than just having a meeting for about 30 minutes and sitting down, making sure that apartment's taken care of. I feel like with those findings and with the opinions that we hear from us today, just to see if we can be able to have more services available through the counselors that we have in the programs, the caseworkers that can help us, and also with the findings.
That's powerful. Thank you, Jordan.
Hi everyone, my name is Ferrari Whitmore. Something I found really interesting about today's findings will have to be the location. I believe just about 70% of you prefer location over amenities, and one thing I noticed is that when you're dealing with low-income housing or just housing that's easily accessible, it's not in the best neighborhoods. It's where you see tagging on the walls, or it's people that's using drugs down the street, or you hear police and helicopters every night. And one thing that always stood out to me when I would, just reminisce when I was in those situations was, how do they expect us to overcome these statistics? How do they expect us to overcome these boundaries when they're placing us in environments that's so easy to fall victim into? So I think definitely that really stood out to me, because if you guys say that you guys want us to change and not fall victim into this or not fall victim into that, I just feel like placing the more accessible housing in those communities are not helping, and it's not benefiting the youth at all.
Thank you for sharing. This is what we mean about lived experience. That you all are the experts, and this next question is revolved around the transition from foster care or the transition into their own housing. So Sam, how about we start with you on this next question? What have you heard from participants about their needs transitioning into their own housing? And what is your organization doing to address those needs?
That's a setup question. It's complex. Because here's the thing, whenever we talk about the challenges we face, not just with youth homelessness, but adult homelessness, it's complex, and everyone wants to find a cookie cutter approach to make it work, and it's not going to ever work that way. It'll help, but what really needs to happen is an individualized process, an individualized pathway for each individual youth, and that is far different for every youth. And so I'm all for allowing youth to have the choice to voice the direction they want to go. and then us making that happen for them. The hardest part is sometimes their choices and that pathway is filled with barriers that we have put in their way. So with contracts, meaning contracts and everyone trying to make the dollars count, and I understand that side of it too. I do not want to be a politician trying to figure out how to serve people, but that is an issue. The rents, number one thing, and we are talking about transitional living. The word transitional means it all. That it means that there's an exit date. So even if you're 21, you're lucky enough to get into a THP Plus and it lasts till 3 years. In 3 years, you gotta go again. So we need more permanent supportive housing for youth. We have a lot for adults, but we don't invest enough for youth, and so I think that would be beneficial. We need more vouchers programs that don't expire. So in my view, the challenge is rents out there, and you saw it, people want to live on their own. Kevin, you're right, it's obvious. Living with others, usually they're living with others, even in my program, they are 2-bedroom apartments, they have their own room, they share. Everyone's like, oh, that's better than a college dorm setup. Yes, but those college students are not coming from the system where they live with other people that had tormented them, and it just triggers so much behavior out of them. So having 1-bedroom, single units, permanent supportive housing, and is DMH here at all today, at all? Okay. Thank you, DMH. You probably don't hear that enough. But because supportive services, we fund a lot of bricks and mortar, getting people housed, and especially youth, but it is difficult to house youth, but it is as difficult to keep people housed. You do that by really good services that youth can choose. That's what we provide at Sycamore is we help people along their pathway. We have a staged approach to housing because we have multiple contracts. And we braid in DMH funding. And the DMH funding provides service support far beyond we could ever do in a single housing contract. And so I'm thankful that we have funding to be able to do that. And I know it works because after 25 years, we have tons of alumni. I started when I was 12, by the way, at Sycamore. But no, service support that is good, that is appropriate, makes sense, permanent supportive housing.
Thanks for sharing.
Do you mind if we repeat the question?
Yeah, I want to repeat it, definitely. And this one is for Ferrari and Jordan. What do you think that you and your peers need most in that transition into your own housing?
And I would start off by saying mental health services more deeply pertain to the applicant that's in the apartment. So yes, more caseworker services, but also individualized therapy that's not only happening just once a week or 2 times a month, but maybe I can call my therapist on a Thursday and a Friday, or I can call her Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Somebody that's around, that's either a mentor or a therapist that's 24/7, maybe not even 24/7, but that's available enough during the day where us as foster can come to with questions, with concerns, with problems that we may be facing within the program that usually don't get answered until 2 weeks later by a caseworker, or until we gotta go out within the community, services that we're just now finding out about, programs that we feel like might not be available to us. We're going out there, we're finding. Also, I would say better transportation services, especially for the foster youth community as parents. Like myself, I have a daughter. So foster youth that's out there that are parents who struggle with these type of situations, just trying to get to school or go to work and having to go outside their way, catch 2-3 buses, go here just to drop their kid off, come back and try to make it on school on time, and they at risk of losing their job every day. So things of that nature, real life situations and problems where it starts in your mental, which is why mental health services are extremely important. I've seen it happen firsthand, even with myself, somebody who's struggled with mental health services in the past, being a former foster youth. So I will start there.
Thanks for sharing.
it's a multi-part answer. It's not just one answer that I feel like youth would need. But I would definitely have to echo what he just said, just mental health, and also life coaches. Shout out to my life coach, Miss Christina back there, always supporting me. She's one of them. Also, shout out to Pat. I work with him in Stepping Forward LA, and just the constant reassurance and the motivation. I feel like when you're dealing with youth that haven't really been out on their own by themselves, or they really don't come from a background with parents or just people that's giving them that reassurance, letting them know if you need help to an appointment, we can do this. If you got a doctor's appointment, we can do it. Even if you have kids, I have a daughter as well, so just making sure my mental is good, making sure everything is supposed to be what it's supposed to be. So I definitely just say just the reassurance of just a life coach or someone checking in. Because being on your own is not easy, and it is appealing, but it has a lot of cons that come with it. So I would definitely just have to echo what the last person said.
Thanks for sharing, y'all. Let's give it up. Let's give it up. As we come to a close here in this panel, the next section is going to be the Q&A with the audience. But for the final question here for the panelists, what do you want to leave the audience with as it pertains to your experience with housing? And that's more so for the lived experts, but I'd love to hear your perspective too as it pertains to a provider.
I guess just that that it's complex, and that individual choice should matter, and that we should be thinking about that when we're developing new contracts and support systems. And by the way, I don't know, there's a lot of people I know in here that have many, many years of experience, and what these two lived experience people just said isn't what we hear all the time, by the way. And it is part of the reason why service component isn't funded as much as it should be. Because yes, 18, 19, 20-year-old coming out of care, the first thing they want to do is like, I ain't working with anyone. I don't need any support, any help. But we find in our program at 18, they say that, and at 21, 24, they say the most important aspect that we serve, or we gave to them when they were with us, was the relationships developed with their therapist, their case manager, their employment specialist, because it's about people, it's about relationships, and people just want to feel safe and cared for the people that are working with them. And so it's a symbiotic relationship, and if you provide services that way, then it works. So I'd love to hear that, because we're always fighting for an equal amount of service dollars being given to a program to provide housing.
I would just say to all my fellow kings and queens in here, my brothers and sisters that's in here, if I could leave y'all with one thing, man, I would just say that don't always be afraid to be of service to your fellow brother and sister that you see. And I know it might sound kind of cliche, but at the same time, sometimes being a foster, we get looked over a lot. Our voice gets unheard. We go through situations where we do challenge authority, gets rejected. So in those moments where we're, how you said, we're looking for those people, those connections, being a servant is always first. When you wear that crown, when you call yourself a king or queen of your empire or your children, your household, you are always of service. So always being of service, whether it be great or small. Excuse me, whether it be great or small. Lending that extra hand. That's something that wasn't always dealt to me. Coming out of the other system as well. Doing time, dealing with the judicial system, maritime law, things of that nature. I was definitely rejected a lot of the time. Not giving an extra hand due to my, I would say my figure stereotypes played a part in that. But mainly just focusing on the here and now, always looking for that positive stride that Mark took note, however I can be of service within myself, because it starts within you. However I can be of service within myself to my fellow brother and sister is always the way, which is something I will leave with y'all. So if you don't remember anything else that I set up here today, always be of service to your fellow brother and sister.
One thing that I would like to leave you guys with is that everyone here has an opportunity to pour into a youth. My mentor, she couldn't be here today, but I would not be up here if it wasn't for her. I'm a prime example of a diamond in the dust, and just the right person that poured into me, invested into me, gave me time, words of encouragement, even sat and prayed for me, cried with me, and I wouldn't even imagine being up here 2 years ago, 3 years ago, if it wasn't for her. So just that grace of time, that investment, the words of encouragement, the opportunities that she's given me, that can be you guys pouring into another youth, and just that seed will blossom so much if you constantly water it, constantly put it in the right environment. I'm doing things that I never thought I would do, my family never thought that I would do, just because that one person took time and invested into me. And that could be you guys pouring into another youth. And I say that humbly, and I also say it proudly. Don't be afraid of communicating. Don't be afraid of just expressing yourself and just being, putting your pride aside and just being transparent with you, because it took that transparency from my mentor for me to gain her trust and actually relate to me. And I actually felt heard and understood, and I wasn't just labeled as, oh, because she's black, she has an attitude, or because she come from this statistic, she's just so fierce. She actually took time to understand me. So I definitely want to leave that with you guys, that take some time today or whenever you have time just to pour into youth. If it's time, a phone call, if it's a word of encouragement, even if it's a prayer, it really goes so far. And now I'm in a position where I want to give back to youth just because of that one person. So that could be you guys. So I just want to leave you guys with that. Thank you.
You all, our panelists here so eloquently stated that this is a complex challenge that we have amongst us, that each individual young person who's transitioning into their own housing have unique needs: transportation, food, opportunities to connect with supportive adults. I can even lean back on my own experience when I was graduating and I was in school and I couldn't go back home. The housing program actually said, you can stay here, we have a job for you, you can stay here. And this was during the time at 18, there were no more services. And so I was fortunate to be connected to other resources and job opportunities. And I think all young people, as we heard here today, need those resources and need constant check-ins and support, regardless if sometimes we say we don't need it. You all, thank you so much again for allowing us to be here. Another round of applause for our panelists. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to start our Q&A. Thank you all.
All right, thank you all for the panelists. Give them one more round of applause. Thank you very much. So we're gonna start to wrap it up here pretty soon, but before we do that, I'd like to open it up to the audience and kind of get some feedback. Try to think of this time as not only an opportunity for us to learn from you as experts in the field, but also us to share some of the recommendations and ideas that we're thinking about moving forward. So with that in mind,
So we're skipping over the table conversations because time has been gone without us. So yes, so big group conversation here.
Hi, I'm Wendy Beer, and I want to thank Joe for his remarks on the panel this morning, but I want to raise some questions. Sorry, my voice always carries. Thank you for coming together. The question that I have is characterizing what these is permanent supportive housing. And I want to challenge that, because I think what we're trying to do is stand them up so that they can carry on once they have executive function to exist independently. We can't afford to provide permanent supportive housing for some of the sickest we have, so how can we extend that? So I really think we need to be cautious about our language, because if we get too ambitious about services we wrap around, we won't be able to help enough of the kids. We can solve this problem. It's only 1,200 kids that are graduating annually into independence in LA, and I want to see us have a home for every one of them with services, but to transition them to independence. Thanks.
I would just say that that seems pretty clear from the evidence that folks want to be transitioning into their own space, so that makes sense. I saw some hands back here.
Anna Rubin.
Hi, I'm Anna Rubin. I'm the Child Welfare Policy Director with AXA, we're a local provider association. I just have two clarifying questions around the services piece. So one was on the slide that said people were asking for more case management. Was that, was there any, like, was that a case manager from their housing program? Was it their CSW? Like, is there any understanding of like who they were actually asking for contact from?
Yeah, that's case manager from the transitional housing program as opposed to case manager.
Like, it's CSW, okay. And then my other question was for the two families. You mentioned that like more mental health services, right? And I'm curious, when you say that, do you mean more of what you've already experienced, or are you talking about a different kind of service? Like, is it you want more time with a therapist, or there's some other kind of service that would support your mental health?
Yeah, I can answer that. So, thank you. Mental health is not just limited to just one-on-one conversations. It can also just be something as like we taking a walk down the street and I'm just telling you about my day, or if I am having a concern, I can reach out and call you. It's not just a schedule by calendar every 2 weeks we're having an appointment. It's more of a, I could say life coach, more of someone that I can just talk to when I need to if I have concerns or questions. You're available to just, hear me talk. So yeah, it's not just limited to just the typical therapy. It could just be anything. It could just be somebody to watch a movie with. Like, hey, are you available to watch a movie?
I would say the mental health support for me would not only be somebody of that stature, as she stated, but also somebody who's there to really help you crack down on life goals as far as business, job placement. And this is also something that can happen frequently, not just once a week or twice, a month with a case manager. Also helping with services as far as maybe it be school or things of that nature in the professional field, or even when it deals with your personal spiritual journey, somebody who's there to help you discover your character. So do a self-assessment, reassessing yourself, inventory, things of that nature, working on your most also regular therapy. But somebody who's constantly around that you can count on, that you know that's not gonna flake on you, or y'all might have an appointment set and be like, oh, well, this happened, I might have to reschedule you today. Somebody who's constantly, without a shadow of a doubt, that's not gonna fall back on you in case something happens.
I also wanted to mention, when you are dealing with youth, trust is very important. So just making sure if you say something, you're going to do it. If you're going to connect them to a resource and they're looking forward to it, try your best to keep your word about that, and not just be transparent, like, hey, I called, I reached out, they couldn't do anything. When you're dealing with youth that's coming from an environment where trust is not a big thing and you're looked at as percentages and not people, trust is so easy to be declined from them. So I definitely would say, just keeping your word, being as trustful as possible, being honest as well. So yeah, I want to say that as well.
Thank you. I just wanted to originally give you guys a kudos. I caught the tail end of it, but I summed up all four that was on the stage. But the most key takeaway is the warm handoff. I am Selena Smith, the tape director. for Alliance for Children's Rights, been in homeless services, CPS, all of that, but the warm handoff is the most crucial piece where there's supportive housing, trauma-informed, making sure those case managers are aware of who they're going to be coming in contact with, meaning that they understand, they remove themselves to understand someone else's barriers beyond their own. And sometimes a youth can be a trigger for one of those case managers, so sometimes there could be a little bit of disconnect. So then it's also reevaluating the overarching picture of what that youth needs and what that youth is coming for. Very transparent, like the young lady said, is like, if you're not able to do something, you're not able to follow through, communicate that. Building boundaries, sometimes case managers can get too client-centered, where that the youth depend a lot on the case manager, but the case manager does not know how to pull back. That's also a transparency, because you want to teach them that independent living. I thank you guys for being able to have that voice for yourself, because it's very crucial. Never hold back, but hold it in a way that you know what you're advocating for. And then, as well as for any case managers here, never be afraid to ask for help if you don't know. That's the one thing about it. You know, being a regional coordinator over services, I had to know what everybody did. But the one thing, if I didn't know, I was never afraid to ask. Because I have to learn from you just like you have to learn from me. So keep doing what you guys are doing.
Can I say one thing in response to what you said? Does anybody know about the Enrich program? Yeah, you know, how do you know about Enrich? You're part of Enrich. Awesome. Well, I think it's important because at the Alliance you have youth coaches, youth supporters. At CLC you definitely do. But at Enrich, the county converted a state block grant in breakneck speed. Gita was a part of that. Jenny, you were probably a part of that. To put $14 million in the hands of foster youth, both for enrichment activities, so going to dinner, getting your hair done, going to yoga, all that kind of stuff. And they paid 10 coaches or so, 22, but I think 10 are actually former foster youth. To actually do coaching for these young people. So I mean, just give it up to DCFS, because everybody thinks it's a big, slow entity. Moves very fast and put a lot of money directly in the hands of young people. So what does Enrich do?
I'm sorry, but my experience personally has not been the best, and a lot of other youth as well. I'm also hearing from our coaches directly that we're not getting connected to our youth. Their caseload's too large. I had a coach, I had gave them my information to meet up with me, they had ghosted me. I was later assigned to another one, hadn't heard from them. Got in a whole argument with the manager of the Enrich program. I mean, it's been tough, but I'm getting my money, so I mean, I'm able to do overall enrichment activities. That's my truth.
Well, thank you. So you want more connectivity with the coach? Okay. Well, that's something that needs to be addressed. And I think it speaks back to what we were seeing in the responses. So, but thank you for that. And I'm glad you're getting your money. That's important.
Thank you.
Yeah, Karen.
Hi folks, first of all, I want to honor and thank both of you for coming out to share your stories. I think that a lot of times when we ask young folks who have lived experiences, sometimes it can be extremely intimidating. Coming into a room full of folks who see you as one perspective when you are multidimensional. I also want to thank you, Ms. Wilson, for going up as an advocate who navigates these spaces with these young folks and helping them find their way, and to the point that you made. I think that all young people, and I want to say this overarchingly for us as professionals and folks that are living this experience, everybody 18 doesn't want help. Regardless of whether you are foster youth or not, I have a 10-year-old who thinks they're grown. So, you know, it is developmental, and I think that it's important for us to remember that they are developing people. So they're going to tell us they don't want our help. They're going to say, I want my independence. That is a very human development, and we have to remember that at one point we all wanted to be grown until we found out it was ghetto. Okay? The other piece that I wanted to offer was that I'm not sure, but in California, but having workshops that are embedded within transitional housing, to Wendy's point, of providing workshops to help young folks navigate into independence. It is one thing, and I think that's the dynamic that we speak to when you are in foster care. There is a deficit to some degree of life skill workshops, right? Because you're transitioning continuously into different formats. Now, there are organizations that will help with that, right? But we often learn where we live. Working in higher ed, that is the tandem of how Brad's life. We're working where we live. So helping folks, do you want to go to college? Here are organizations and workshops that help you navigate college. Are you just looking to go into the workforce? Here are organizations that help and support with those workshops. It's paramount, and there should be funding to support transitional housing and orgs to be connected to those places so that it doesn't just fall on a caseworker, because I did hear you. That it's heavy work, and when you go into case management, you do it from a space of love, but understanding that you are only so visible to be able to be accessible to what your needs are, and there are places that can be supplemented. As a sidebar, totally unrelated, my actual job that pays my bills, I want to let you all know about, is called Cal Kids. I support and run the research part for that organization, and Cal Kids actually is available. I have a little dignity over here. Cal Kids is actually, I try not to stand up, that's the problem. Cal Kids is a grant or a scholarship seed funding for students that identify in one of these four populations of English language learners, low income, current or former foster youth, or students experience unhousedness. Now, it is a snapshot in time from October 2021, and depending on how many of those beautiful seats that you sit in, you are eligible for up to $1,500 to go towards your educational training, be that vocational, 2-year or 4-year institutions. As practitioners, please have your students log on to the calkids.org website. All they need is their SSID number, which they can locate from their school district, their last appointed school district if they were in school at the time when they have up to age 26 to utilize those funds. Every baby is not going to be eligible, I'm just going to be honest, because if they were not in California in a public school in October Census Date 2021, they will not be eligible, and currently there is no pipeline to petition them being added. But if they were coded as foster youth, low income, English language learner, or experiencing unhousedness, and that was reported to the CDE, the state has an account for them. 5 million accounts were generated. Please have your students look into them, or your clients look into them. Thank you.
We're going to have one more comment, and I just want to also say that Alliance for Children's Rights is doing an event coming up that will pull together tape providers, and more information like Mahogany shared can be shared.
Hi everyone. My name is JT Chestnut. Hi Daniel. My name is JT Chestnut, Guardian Scholars Program of Cal State LA Outreach and Retention Specialist. It's good to see everyone. Thank you very much for the panel talk. It was wonderful. Former foster youth here, so my heart is always with you. I think the beautiful thing about this conversation is understanding that one thing that really popped out was the word isolation. And I always say to my students, there is a distinct difference between isolation and solitude. So we want to introduce our students and our youth that community is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And as we're all here as one community, this is where the collaborative effort and the warm hands-off that the sister was saying is truly important. So we must challenge ourselves to pass out those business cards and pass out those connections so we can able to have more deeper conversations moving on. One thing that I know for sure is that all the youth and all the students, similar to what Sister Mahogany was saying, at the age of 18, 13, 15, 22, or even 26, they all want to be loved and respected. So at the end of the day, let's open up our minds together to take that step to be present for them. Thank you.
Alright, so we are wrapping up.
Real quick, as we're wrapping up, I think we have a lot to kind of bring back and think about, but I want to share just a few things of a few ideas of where our minds were thinking after seeing the research and going deep in there. So the first thing we're thinking about is flexibility in contracting, right? There's this kind of being able to move closer to familiar communities, even if that means moving from a different spot or city to another, right? So that's recommendation number one. Recommendation number two, really thinking about, there was a little bullet point or a little statistic in there that said that only 13% of young folks have transitioned from a THP NMD program to a THP Plus program. So thinking about the strengthening the pathways from program to program to program, whether that's NMD to a FYI voucher or NMD to Plus. Third recommendation, probably no surprise, expanding, increasing the number of units available for young folks specifically. Kind of simple, like the more units available, theoretically, the less costly the rent is. But irrespective of that, earmarking and having units set aside for transition age youth. And then finally, one of the big limitations of the survey was that we did not get a large sample size of SILP, supervised independent living placement, and FYI voucher holders. So thinking about replicating a similar study to understand and ascertain if there are unique experiences and preferences for SILP and FYI youth.
Yeah, and then to build on that, we saw an underrepresentation of young people who are parenting. So I think also elevating, the voices and preferences of young people who are parenting in this space would be helpful too. Awesome. Okay, so we are wrapping up, and we want to invite you, as you continue to percolate on this and have thoughts and ideas around recommendations or other pieces of the conversation that you felt maybe we could do more with, feel free to email Kevin Clark. Daniel is available, I'm available as well, but Kevin is going to be the holder of this information. Along with that, we will be sending a follow-up email to all of you and folks who signed up but couldn't make it today to share a white paper on the findings from this survey. And it will include recommendations that Kevin just mentioned, and then what you want to add. So again, please email Kevin. We also have a little plug for our Pritzker Center programming. We have an event next week on June 5th, Strengthening Support Networks for LGBTQ plus youth in honor of Pride Month. You can scan the QR code. You'll get a whole bunch of information about the Pritzker Center. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can sign up for the event next week. And we thank you so much. We have a couple minutes left if you want to just wrap up with your table mates, meet some more new people, follow the young man's advice about passing out your business cards, keep connecting, and thanks for coming today.